I'm back with Twisted Confessions, Chapter 12. It's Thursday, November 10th, 2022, 8 a.m. The sitting around and waiting for something to unfold was starting to get the best of Ross's nerves. So he did the only thing that he knew would help ease the hysteria that had been flitting in and out of his mind since he learned of Jane's murder. He convinced Samantha to cut out of work for the day and join him on a road trip to visit their younger daughter, Annabelle. Samantha, the die-hard worker that she was attempting to get some last-minute design work done on her laptop in the passenger seat. How's it coming along? Well, I'm doing the best I can with the lack of internet. She closed her laptop and slipped it into the case that rested between her feet on the floor. I'm done. I'm done. I did as much as I can possibly do. And besides, you need me more than these logos need me. True story. Ross kept his eyes on the remaining I-55 interstate as he reached across the console and grabbed Samantha's hand, creating small circles on her fingers with his thumb. Hey, Jane. Hey, Jane was just as close to you as she was to me. You deserve some time to grieve just as much as I do. Yeah, I know, but I didn't see her every day like you. Her death will impact your everyday life for a while. It's hard to get past that. Well, I have you to pull me out of it. Thank God I have you, Sammy. Right back at you. Samantha gave his hand a squeeze. Do you think Annabelle is going to be mad that we are surprising her at the campus? She turned the volume knob on the radio console, singing along to Kenny Chesney's lyrics, overpowering one of the country singer's older songs. Using his hand as a prop for her car dancing, Samantha delivered a dramatic version of You Had Me from Hello. Ross shook his head, silently participating in his fun-loving wife's antics until the song came to a close and a commercial broke her serenade. There is a possibility that she may not want to see her mom and dad without warning, but we've got our backup plan if she needs to get rid of us. Ross thought about his old college roommate, who was now a professor at Kennedy University. Craig Tipton was the reason why Ross met Jane in the first place. After introductions were made, the three of them had eased into a friendship that was often centered on intelligent conversations involving finances. The only difference now was that Craig switched gears away from finance and taught design. As soon as Annabelle had decided she wanted to follow her mother's footsteps and tackle the major, Ross reached out to his old friend to gain insight about the program that he led at Kennedy University in St. Louis. As an added bonus, Samantha shared that common artistic bond with Craig, and it was a way that they could form their own connections. It might be good to be around someone who knew Jane as well as you. Yeah, Ross thought about the days when he, Craig, and Jane had been inseparable. Self-confessed nerds, they would often ditch school social events to study and have off-the-wall conversations about topics that range from finance to the future of lifespans. And just as easy as he slipped into memories of the past, he was pulled out of them with a jerk. The voice of Terry Tyson erupted from the radio, an advertisement for his book shouting at him from the speakers. There is no time like the present to get out of debt, folks. Read my latest book, Slipping into a Cozy Retirement, to learn the critical steps in paying off loans with success and investing in your 401k plan tax-free. As Ross listened to Terry's voice, pushing his advice onto the world, he unknowingly gripped the steering wheel with a force that made his knuckles lose color, and he drifted into the middle lane just as a tractor trailer was switching into the same lane from the right. Samantha shrieked, a horn punched the air, followed by a parade of heartbeats that picked up speed in Ross's chest. He released the grip of the steering wheel and steadied himself in the left lane. If he didn't start paying better attention, Terry Tyson would kill him. Ross, what on earth? Sorry, honey. I'm sorry. I This guy is still getting under your skin, isn't he? Samantha leaned back in her seat, composing herself from the near death experience. Ross shook his head, contradicting his next words. Yes, it's not fair that he can go around preaching his poor advice to people. He doesn't even have a license. Does this have anything to do with you and Jane's big dreams of writing your own finance book? Samantha knew him. She knew that the memories of his and Jane's career dream of writing a book together had grown highly sensitive since Jane died, and Terry Tyson could send him into a spiral of emotion. That and the fact that everything I'm learning in this new book is legit. He threw a thumb up, motioning to the back seat where the CPA book was face up, a a halo of sun circling it. It's basic math, but everything this Tyson guy touts is propaganda, and he has no license to back it up. Samantha said the words she had heard so many times before. Ross wasn't a complainer by nature, but it felt like a stab in his side every time he heard Terry Tyson's voice. He pulled off the exit and navigated his way through the streets of St. Louis, passing the art museum along the way. It was one of Samantha's favorite places, and she smiled when he saw her looking at it in awe, as if she hadn't walked through the galleries 100 times already. She would undoubtedly pay the Institute a visit on this trip as well and remind Ross that they should have gotten married there. The prominent columns made it look like less of a museum and more like a library. They were close enough to see the top curve of the gateway arch, decorating the blue sky up ahead. The bottom half was concealed by the buildings that lined the main street of the city, Washington Avenue. Ross pulled into the campus expecting to get the go ahead from the bored security guard at the gate. Instead, the man emerged from his post and passed Ross a questioning glance. What can I help you with? I'm here to visit my daughter. The man crouched down, leaning into the vehicle and scanning the back seat and Samantha. You'll have to check in at the front desk in the main reception area. Just as Ross was about to ask why, he felt a rush of heat pass through him, embarrassed that he had forgotten that a college dean, let alone one of his best friends, had been murdered on his campus just days ago. Of course, security on nearby colleges and universities were going to up their game after something like that, even if it happened several miles away. It wouldn't surprise him if colleges across the nation enhanced the security after such a tragic event. But first, I'll need you to step out of the car. Wait, what? Samantha started but stopped and conveyed understanding. Yes, sir. He obliged, stepping out of the car. The guard did his duty and proceeded to check the glove box. Samantha in the trunk. Samantha in the trunk. He gave them clear, all clear. He reminded them to check in at the front desk. Oh, one more thing. He rested his beefy fingers on the top of Ross's door. Yes? Where did you get that book? Confused, Ross tilted his head to the side. The one in your back seat. Another question made its way to the guard's face. Ross's busy mind was making him forgetful. He brought the paperback, hoping to strike up a conversation about the book's principles with Craig. He wanted to gauge Craig's opinion on the teachings, since he had been someone who was educated in finance, but didn't currently play in the field. An outsider's opinion, Ross thought. Oh, from a little library in my hometown. I just finished it. The guard softened his stern face and smiled. My dad would be rolling over in his grave right now if he knew I was implementing the principles taught in that book. Ross let out a hearty laugh. Let me guess, your dad was in the finance industry. Spent his career at Jones and Edwards. Ross gave the guard an all-knowing smile. He spent his days teaching college students about financial methods that were traditionally supported. but he was open to the fact that there were many other ways of doing things. Evidently, this book was the accelerant to some of those more practical ways of thinking. The wear and tear of grief was evident on Craig Tipton's face. His already downturned eyes drooped further, tugged by pillowy bags that publicized a lack of sleep. Ross guessed that his friend had been up all night for the same reasons as him, activated by the many scenarios that may have taken Jane's life. By the time they had paid Annabelle a quick surprise visit in between classes, it was after lunch and the cafeteria crowd had diminished, making it a peaceful setting for Craig, Samantha, and Ross to meet up. The three of them crowded into a corner booth and dove into their grief as they would burst, as if they would burst if they held it in for a second longer. They passed their suspicions back and forth. Who would do such a thing and why? With questions mirrored in the crinkles of their brows, they dissected Jane's death, and through teary eyes, they rehashed their memories, mental photos that Ross had seen play out in his own mind since he received the heartbreaking news. Ross picked up on a distance in Craig that seemed to span further than the broken heart of a lost friend. During one of Ross's retellings of a remember when comment, he observed more than grief. It was the same look that Craig had gotten all those years ago when he broke the news to Jane and Ross that he was switching from finance to graphic design, as if it was a betrayal to them that he wanted to switch careers and follow his creative side. What else is going on? Ross came out with it. The same way he and Jane had prodded back then when they were inquiring about why Craig called the official, obscure meeting to announce his career transition. Craig emitted the natural signs for unease. His gaze scanned the room as if he was preparing for someone to eavesdrop on the conversation at any moment. He folded and unfolded his knuckles repeatedly, his massive hands banging the hard table with every move. Then a deep inhale, followed by an exhale that came along with drooped shoulders, his body finally able to relax and come to terms with what he was about to say. You guys don't know this. I'm assuming Jane didn't tell you. She was secretive about it. Ross was confused. Craig continued. Jane and I were dating. Ross leaned back on the bench, taking in the news. Wow, I had no idea. Oh, Craig, I'm so sorry. I can't imagine what you're going through. The surprise of the announcement was lost on Samantha, and being the empathetic woman she was, jumped into consoling him for a loss that was bigger than they'd anticipated. Craig's grief was instantly magnified. His loss expanded beyond friendship territory and stretched into relationship territory. Samantha reached across the table, enveloping his hand in her own. I really had no idea. Ross said the only thing he could say. He tried to ignore the deceit he felt. All those times that he and Jane chatted about their personal and professional lives, and this very important fact was never addressed. And that's for good reason. Jane didn't want anybody to know. She was really private about it for reasons that I'm really questioning now. What do you mean? Samantha released his hand gently, cocking her head to the side. Well, Craig took another deep breath. He steepled his hands together, resting his fingertips on his lips. I, I kind of got a little jealous at one point. Ross had a million other questions racing to be first in line, but he felt uncontrollable laugh surface instead, surprising them all. He leaned back in the booth and let out a guff, immediately catching himself. I'm sorry. Well, I can't picture you two together and then to think of you jealous. I know, Craig smiled. It's okay now that I think about it. It is pretty funny. I'm not a jealous person, but there was this guy. Ross's laughter came to a halt. His smile straightened into a thin smile. The shock of the relationship had worn off, and he was ready to continue his manhunt. What guy? That's the thing. I'm not sure who he was. Craig wiped a hand down his face. I'm so embarrassed to tell you this, but this guy was texting Jane, and he was adamant about meeting up with her. I just thought it was maybe a student or a faculty member that had taken a liking to her at first, and I didn't think much of it, but it continued. Well, who was he? Samantha asked, holding her coffee cup between her both hands. That's the thing, I don't know who he was. I happened to find her phone buzzing on my kitchen table one day while she was out running. Craig's description of the scenario caused a pinch in Ross's heart. He remembered how dedicated she was to running. She never went a day without getting in at least 3 miles and considered the exercise her therapy. You looked at her phone? Ross sounded more accusing than he intended. Yes, I know, so childish, right? But the text didn't come in under an Illinois number. After I looked it up, I discovered it was a California area code. Samantha twisted her neck toward Ross, searching. Who could Jane have known in California? Your guess is as good as mine. She never once mentioned knowing anyone in the state. Ross asked a question that was grating his side. But what did it say? In my defense, I just happened to look over and see the first text, and of course, it got me curious. It said, We need to talk. Well, how did you know it was a man? Well, when the text kept coming, I asked Jane about it. And obviously, she wasn't too excited about the fact that I was invading her privacy. Craig corrected himself. Unintentionally invading her privacy. I mean, I was nervous for her because there were several texts coming in a row, all begging her to meet up and accusing her of ignoring a very important topic. Weird. Ross felt the start of a headache from the confused expression that had been planted on his face. Forcefully pinched together eyebrows and a scrunched up nose frozen in place. Exactly, exactly. And to be honest with you, I didn't think twice about it until I got the horrific news that she was murdered. I guess I just thought it was some guy wanting to date her or had some unfinished relationship business with her. Craig closed his eyes and leaned his forehead on his fingertips. Ross could feel the pain wafting off him. And to think, I accused her of having an affair. I said some things I regret. That's how I knew it was a man texting her. When I asked her about it, she kept saying he was harmless. I took that to mean that the guy was seriously interested in her. Any of us would have done the same thing, Samantha consoled him. You can't beat yourself up for that, Craig. The questions that were already circling through Ross's mind were now bumping into one another. And with the new information, why was Jane being so secretive? And why was someone sending her aggressive text? He knew that time was of the essence, so he asked, So, should we take that number to the police? And that's the end of chapter 12.